All right, so today we're doing a deep dive into online safety for women in 2024.
Okay.
S- Specifically, we're looking at the Women's Guide to Cyber Safety 2024
Hmm.
by Sarah Fraser. Now, I know what you might be thinking, another safety guide.
Right.
But trust me, this one's different. It's not just about, telling you to be careful online, which, let's be real, we've all heard a million times.
Yeah.
This guide really digs into the why, the how bad it actually is, all of that.
Yeah. What struck me right away was how it frames the issue. It acknowledges right off the bat that women are often both the targets of online harassment, but then also kind of scapegoated for it. It's like
That's
we're
it.
supposed to navigate this impossible minefield. And then when something blows up, surprise, it's our fault.
Right. It's like, well, you should have known better. Even though, like, how could you?
Exactly. And the guide doesn't shy away from how big of a problem this really is. Like, did you know that a whopping 85% of women worldwide have seen online violence against other women?
Wow, 85%. That's a huge number. And it makes you wonder, how much of that spills over from the online world into like real life.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just an online thing at all. It can affect women's careers, relationships, even their physical safety. It's really scary when you think about it.
Yeah, it's easy to think of it as like, oh, it's just online, but it's really not. And the guide, it doesn't let you forget that. And one thing it points out, I thought this was interesting, was how often women are pressured to just like stay silent about it.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like, don't rock the boat, don't
Yeah.
make a fuss, even when they're facing like serious harassment.
It's like being silenced twice, you
Yeah.
know? First by the harassment itself, and then by this expectation that you just deal with it quietly.
It's like you're not even allowed to have feelings about it.
Right. It's messed up. But, instead of going down that rabbit hole, let's look at some specifics. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, good idea. Where do you want to start?
Well, social media is the obvious one, right?
Okay.
And the guide calls out Twitter and Meta, like specifically.
Meta, as in Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, those guys.
And what's crazy is it's not like they don't know this is happening. Like, they have to know how bad it is on their platform.
Right. Like, the guide even brings up Leslie Jones, the actress. She was harassed off Twitter. And this is someone with, like, a huge platform.
Yeah.
If someone like her can't catch a break, what hope does anyone else have?
Exactly. And I know like these platforms don't have any tools in place. They've got blocking, reporting, privacy settings, all that. But reading the guide, it kind of felt like, I don't know, like those tools aren't really enough.
I think they're a starting point, sure, but yeah. Like, you can block someone, but they can just create a new account. And even if your profile's private, you still have to think about things like, I don't know, geotagging photos and stuff.
Oh, geotagging. Yeah, that's a good point. For anyone who doesn't know, that's basically when your location is like embedded into the photos you take on your phone, right?
Exactly. And the guide does a really good job of explaining why that's a bigger deal than it seems. It's not just about like some random creep knowing where you are.
Right.
It's about how all that location data gets like packaged up and used in ways that most people don't even realize.
Yeah, it all gets a little Big Brother-ish,
Yeah.
come to think of it. I'm not even sure I understand how all that works. Like, what's with all the data that's attached to a photo anyway?
Oh, you're talking about EXIF data?
EXIF data, is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's basically all this hidden information that's stored within your photos. Most people have no clue it even exists.
So, like, what kind of information are we talking
Yeah,
about?
lock up time and date, the photo was taken, the type of camera that was used, even GPS coordinates, all kinds of stuff.
Wow, so even if you think you're just sharing a harmless photo, there's a whole other layer of information attached to it. That's kind of creepy.
See, this is what the guide is getting at. It's not about being paranoid. It's about being informed. Because once that data's out there, it's out there.
Yeah, no taking it back.
Exactly. And speaking of things that are hard to take back, sharing photos online, we've all seen the creepy comments, but this guide goes deeper. It talks about the very real dangers of revenge porn and deepfakes.
Deepfakes, those are the videos that make it look like someone is doing or saying something they never did, right?
Exactly, and with AI getting more and more sophisticated, it's only going to get harder to tell what's real and what's not.
That's actually pretty scary.
It is scary, especially for women who are, let's face it, already targeted way more online. Imagine the damage a convincing deepfake could do.
I don't want to think about it. Okay, so we've covered social media, photos. That's a lot already. But I'm guessing this is just like the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh yeah, we're just getting started. The guide also goes into messaging apps, and let me tell you, that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
Messaging apps, right? Like, you think of them as these kind of private, safe spaces,
Yeah, for sure.
But this guide, it really pulls back the curtain on that whole idea.
So which apps are we talking about here specifically?
Well, they talk a lot about Kik and Discord, both super popular, obviously, but they've also become kind of magnets for, well, for problematic behavior, let's just say. In fact, the guide even mentions that Kik murder case. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, that was awful, that poor girl.
It really just shows you how real the danger can be. You think you're safe in these, like, anonymous online spaces, but...
Right, it can be easy to forget there are real people behind those usernames.
Yeah. Exactly, and the thing is, these dangers aren't always obvious. Like, younger users especially, they might not have the experience to really navigate all that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to forget how much experience plays into all of this. Speaking of things that aren't always what they seem, what about WhatsApp? It's owned by Meta, right?
Right, which is interesting because...
And they're always talking about encryption,
Yeah.
and privacy, but it's like, come on, Meta, you know?
It's almost like some of these tech companies are better at talking the talk than walking the walk,
Yeah, totally.
Like, they'll promote these features that sound good on paper, but
Yeah.
when it comes to actually making their platform safe, there's a disconnect.
Yeah, like their actions don't always match their words.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we've got messaging apps, but then the guide also talks about Reddit. And this one surprised me a bit, I have to say, because it's not like other social media, really.
No, it's more like what? Forums, interest-based communities.
Right, exactly. But the guide uses it as an example of how even those spaces can turn bad.
Yeah, anonymity can be a double-edged sword for sure. On the one hand, it can be liberating, but on the other, it can make people feel like they can get away with anything.
And because these platforms, they often have less oversight, right? So those harmful behaviors, they can really flourish.
Right, it's like the Wild West out there sometimes.
So it's not about avoiding these platforms altogether, is it? It's more about being aware of the potential risks.
Exactly, it's about being a savvy online citizen, I guess you could say.
I like that, savvy online citizen. Okay, so we've done social media, photos, messaging apps, Reddit. Where to next?
Well, the guide also touches on the online workplace, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other ballgame these days, with so many people working remotely.
Right, and it can be even trickier to navigate harassment in that context, because the lines get blurred, you know what I mean?
Totally. Like, what flies at the office might not fly at home, and vice versa.
Exactly. And it's not always clear what those boundaries are. Remember that whole Jeffrey Toobin thing?
Oh my gosh, how could I forget?
Talk about a cautionary tale.
For anyone who missed it, he was a legal analyst?
Yeah, and he got caught exposing herself on a work Zoom call.
It was a huge scandal.
Right, and I mean, that's an extreme example, obviously. But it just shows you how quickly things can go wrong. Even when you're at home, you're still in a professional setting, in a way.
And there can be real consequences for your actions, like in his case.
For sure. And that's why documentation is so important, especially in the online workplace. Because it's like, if it's not documented, did it even happen?
Yeah, it's your word against theirs, basically.
Right, and that's never a good position to be in. So, yeah, the guide really emphasizes the importance of keeping records, just in case.
Makes sense, especially because online interactions can be so fleeting. It's not like an in-person conversation where you might have witnesses or something.
Exactly. Digital evidence can be a lot harder to come by.
Okay, so documentation. Got it. What else does the guide say about staying safe in the online workplace?
Well, one thing they talk about is setting boundaries, which is important in any workplace, but it can be even more challenging online, I think.
Yeah, because it's so easy to just fire off an email or a message without really thinking about it.
Exactly. And it's easy to misinterpret tone and intent in written communication, too.
True. And things can escalate quickly when you don't have those nonverbal cues to go on.
Exactly. So, yeah, the guide recommends setting clear boundaries from the start, both for yourself and for the people you work with.
What kind of boundaries are we talking about here?
Well, it could be things like setting specific hours when you're available to respond to messages.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I need to do that.
Right. Or having a separate work phone or computer so you're not constantly getting notifications after hours.
Ooh, that's a good idea, too.
It's all about creating that separation between your work life and your personal life, which can be hard to do when you're working remotely.
It can be so hard.
Yeah.
Especially when you're working from home. It's like your office is right there.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah, setting those boundaries is key.
Got it. Boundaries are important. Anything else about the online workplace before we move on?
I think that's the gist of it. Oh, actually, one more thing. The guide talks about the importance of reporting any incidents of harassment or abuse. Even if it's something small, it's important to speak up.
Yeah, there's this tendency to just brush things off, like, oh, it's not a big deal, or I don't want to make a fuss.
Right, but the thing is, if it happens once, it's more likely to happen again, and it might not always be something small.
That's a good point. And I guess reporting it creates a record too, right?
Exactly, and that can be helpful if you ever need to take further action.
Okay, so we've covered social media, photos, messaging apps, Reddit, the online workplace. This guide is really comprehensive. What else is there?
Well, buckle up because next up is online dating.
It's almost like, yeah, like the guide is saying, look, these risks are out there, but you don't have to just accept them,
Yeah,
you know?
totally. And it's so easy to get caught up in the whole digital bubble. But those online interactions, they can turn into real life encounters so fast.
Right, and that's when things can get really complicated. So
Exactly.
the guy talks about things like, the classic advice, meeting in public places, sharing your location with a friend,
Right, all that common sense stuff.
which, let's be real, sometimes goes out the window when you're like excited about someone.
Totally. I've been there.
But I love that the guide also gives women permission to like prioritize their safety above all else. Like
Yeah,
if you need to ghost someone to feel safe, do it.
100%.
It's about putting yourself first, which is so important.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered social media, photos, messaging apps, Reddit, the online workplace, dating apps. I feel like we've covered it all, but I know there's more.
Well, there's one more big one. Gaming.
Oh, right, of course, gaming. I feel like that's a whole other beast.
It really is. And the guide, it kind of connects the toxicity in gaming to how competitive it is.
Oh, yeah, that makes it. It's like in traditional sports, there's always trash talk.
Right, exactly.
But in online gaming, it feels like those lines are crossed way more often.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to women.
What do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it is the anonymity factor.
Oh, right. People hiding behind avatars.
Exactly. They feel like they can say and do whatever they want with no consequences.
It's like the Wild West out there.
Totally.
So what does the guide say about staying safe in online gaming?
Well, for one thing, they talk about the importance of finding supportive communities. Like, look for groups or guilds that have a zero tolerance policy for harassment.
That's a good idea. Surround yourself with good people.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to report any abuse you encounter, even if it's just trash talk.
Yeah, it's easy to just brush it off, but
Right, but it's important to speak up.
so you're basically saying don't just accept it as part of the gaming experience.
Exactly.
Got it.
And then on a more practical level, they also recommend using all the safety features that are available. Well, like muting or blocking players who are being abusive, reporting them to the platform.
Right, all the stuff we talked about before.
Exactly.
Okay, so gaming. Got it. Anything else before we wrap up this deep dive?
I think that's pretty much it.
Wow, this guide was really something else. It's not every day you come across a cybersecurity guide that's both informative and, like, empowering.
Right. It's not just about scaring you into being safe online. It's about giving you the tools and the knowledge to actually take control.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And honestly, I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. It's not about living in fear. It's about being informed, being aware, and being proactive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the Women's Guide to Cyber Safety 2024. We hope you found it as eye-opening as we did, and most importantly, we hope you feel empowered to stay safe online. Until next time, stay aware and stay safe out there, everyone.